The Covina Massacre. It was Christmas Eve 2008 in Covina, California. Inside a home on Near Glen Avenue, the Ortega family gathered for their annual holiday celebration. Laughter, wrapping paper, and the smell of dinner filled the house. More than 20 relatives gathered from across the country. At 11:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. When the door opened, a man stood outside dressed as Santa Claus, red suit, white beard, holding a large gift-wrapped box. Some inside even cheered, thinking it was part of the night's fun, but it wasn't. The man was Bruce Pardo, the ex-husband of Sylvia Ortega. They had recently divorced over ongoing financial issues. Inside the box was a homemade flamethrower and several handguns. The moment he stepped inside, he pulled out a gun and started filling the room with lead. Panic exploded through the house. People dove behind furniture, trying to shield their children. Some sprinted toward any door they could find. Then Bruce opened the gift. He doused the living room with liquid fuel and then threw a lighter, instantly setting everything ablaze. The house went up in flames within seconds, curtains, furniture, and the walls all swallowed by the growing inferno. Neighbors watched helplessly as the home collapsed into a burning shell. By the time firefighters reached the scene, the fire was too intense to enter. When the blaze was finally extinguished, the place where the Ortega family had celebrated every Christmas was nothing but ash. 9 people were killed. He fled the scene immediately, still wearing his Santa suit. Hours later, Bruce was found dead in his brother's home. A Christmas Eve that should have created holiday memories for the Ortegas instead became one of the most devastating acts of violence in Covina's history. Escondido Christmas Electrocution. It was the start of the holiday season in November 2024 in Escondido, California. Across the neighborhood, houses were already glowing. Wreaths hung on doors, strings of lights wrapped around rooftops, and workers climbed ladders to help families decorate early for Christmas. Among them was Antonio Pascal Mateo, a 24-year-old contractor neighbors regularly hired for Christmas decorating. That morning, he arrived at a client's home to hang lights along a tall pine tree in the front yard, a job he'd done dozens of times. He set up the ladder, checked the strands, then began climbing. He reached higher into the branches, carrying the lights in his arms. Then, in a split second, the wind shifted. The lights snagged on a high-voltage power line just feet away from the tree. The moment the bulbs touched the wire, a surge of electricity exploded through the line and into Antonio's body. He was thrown violently backward, left dangling 30 feet in the air, suspended by the very tree he'd been decorating. Neighbors heard the crack and ran outside. They saw him hanging there, motionless, his body still twitching from the electrical shock. 911 calls flooded in. Fire crews arrived, but they couldn't touch him, not while the power line was still live. Antonio hung there for nearly an hour, unconscious, suspended above the lawn. By the time the power was cut and the firefighters finally brought him down, it was too late. Antonio Pascual Mateo was pronounced dead at the scene, killed by a jolt powerful enough to stop his heart before he ever hit the ground. Philadelphia Christmas Tree Inferno. It was the early morning of January 5th, 2022 in Philadelphia's Fairmount neighborhood. Inside a crowded row house, 3 generations of one family were sleeping. On the first floor stood the family Christmas tree, dry, brittle, and surrounded by stockings and presents. Around 6 a.m., everything changed. A 5-year-old child was playing quietly before anyone else woke up. He picked up a lighter and flicked it, not realizing what would happen. The tree instantly caught on fire. Within seconds, the room burst into flames. Thick smoke raced up the staircase. Alarm after alarm remained silent. Upstairs, the family woke to darkness and heat. Screams echoed throughout the house. Mothers grabbed their children, clawing for windows, trying to make it through the smoke-choked hallway. The row house was set ablaze. One family member smashed a window frame with her bare hands and leapt out onto the street, flames rolling behind her. Neighbors rushed to help, trying to reach the upper floors, but the heat was too intense. Inside, relatives huddled together in the bedrooms, trapped by the fire racing up the only staircase. Firefighters arrived in minutes, but the blaze was already roaring out the windows, devouring the home from the inside out. When the flames were finally knocked down, the true horror was revealed. 12 family members were dead. 9 of them were children. Investigators found that the fire alarms weren't set off because they contained no batteries, removed intentionally to stop constant beeping. The 5-year-old who accidentally started the fire miraculously survived. He became one of the sole survivors to the tragedy that would haunt him for life. The city of Philadelphia mourned for weeks. A small Christmas tree, a moment of innocent curiosity, had sparked one of the deadliest house fires in the city's history. Clarksboro Eggnog Disaster. It was Christmas Eve 1981 at a country-run nursing home in Clarksboro, New Jersey. Residents gathered in the common room, festive lights, a holiday dinner underway, and a large bowl of homemade eggnog at the center of the table. Staff served the creamy drink with cheer. Laughter echoed. Plates cleared, but in the seconds after the cups were passed, something went terribly wrong. Over the next several hours, residents began to feel sick. Headaches, dizziness, nausea. Many assumed that the holiday spirits were too strong. Some went to bed early. However, in the morning, what happened was catastrophic. 9 residents had died. Many more were critically sick. Ambulances lined up outside the home. Stretchers moved in and out through the snow. Families rushed to the building in panic as officials tried to control the chaos. The investigation came quickly. The eggnog, poured with smiles hours earlier, had quietly turned toxic. Mishandling and warm storage allowed dangerous bacteria from the raw, unpasteurized eggs to grow inside the mixture. The nursing home was placed under heavy scrutiny. Health inspectors moved from room to room. Administrators were questioned. Families demanded answers. But for the loved ones who died, nothing could undo that night. The Christmas Rush delivery tragedy. It was the height of the Christmas rush in 2017, the busiest season for delivery drivers across the UK. In Christchurch, Dorset, 53-year-old Don Lane climbed into his delivery van like he did every morning. Exhausted, sick, but determined to finish his shift. Don was an insulin-dependent diabetic. He needed regular checkups, monitoring, and time to manage his condition, but time was something he couldn't afford. At his delivery company, missing a shift came with a strict penalty, a £150 fine for every day a driver failed to find their own replacement. Don had already been fined once that summer for attending a medical appointment. Since then, he pushed himself harder than ever. However, during the final holiday rush, Don became seriously sick. Feverish, weak, barely able to stand. He wanted to take a day off, but his manager scolded him, so Don worked through his sickness, still ran his shift, still tried to keep up. He didn't want to let anyone down. Later that day, when he got home from his shift, he suddenly collapsed. Don Lane was rushed to Royal Bournemouth Hospital, but the damage was already done. He never recovered. On January 4th, 2018, doctors pulled his life support. His death sparked outrage across the UK, raising questions about a system that forced employees to work while sick. His widow, Ruth, later said the same thing again and again. Don was putting the company before his health because he felt he had no choice. Fatal Christmas tree electrocution. It was late on December 2nd, 2022, a warm Friday night in Lusignan, Guyana. Outside a private residence, a crew of 4 worked to prepare a massive holiday display. The centerpiece of the project was a 27-foot-tall metal Christmas tree that towered above the yard. Among the workers was 29-year-old Deepak Ramdeen, a machinist from Good Hope. He stood alongside the Ramcharan brothers, Gupta and Mahendra, and their co-worker Shivraj Rulal. They were using a crane mounted on a truck, slowly lifting the heavy metal tree upright. The plan was simple. Get it standing, secure it, and unveil the holiday centerpiece for the neighborhood. But directly above them were overhead electrical wires, close enough to be dangerous, but easy to miss in the dark. As the crane lifted the structure higher, the workers guided it carefully by hand. Then it happened. The star on top of the giant tree touched a live power line. Instantly, thousands of volts surged through the metal tree and straight into the men holding it. The shock hit Deepak and the others without warning. 4 bodies collapsed at once. Neighbors witnessed the tragedy unfold, quickly running outside to find the men on the ground, their bodies scorched, the crane still alive with electricity. Emergency vehicles raced them to Georgetown Public Hospital. In the chaos of the burns unit, doctors worked to stabilize all 4. But their injuries were catastrophic. Deepak Ramdeen died shortly after arrival, the electrical current having torn through his body with lethal force. The other 3 men suffered severe burns and remained hospitalized, their recovery uncertain. Outside the home, the unfinished metal tree still laying on the ground, silent, twisted, and scorched at the tip.